Pyrokinesis is one of the most iconic abilities of all time. I mean, there's pretty much someone using some kind of firepower in every single anime. So I want to find out why. Why did such a basic power give us so many of the most legendary characters ever? And out of these characters, who deserves the crown as the absolute best depiction of a fire wielder in all of anime history? If I wanted to find the answer, I knew there was no better place to start than with one of the most iconic characters from one of the most iconic anime ever made. Portgas D. Ace. So, in the world of One Piece, people get powers by eating these weird-looking devil fruits. And Ace ate a devil fruit that doesn't just give him fire powers, it literally transforms his entire body into fire. Which basically means that if someone tries to punch him, for example, their fist just goes right through him. Except in like this, one case, but we don't talk about that. But on top of that, it also means that he can turn certain body parts into flames. So like, create these massive fire fists, shoot rapid fire bullets made of fire from his fingertips, generate enormous pillars of flame, make these tiny fireflies that look really cute and pretty until they just explode in your face. He even has a technique called Flame Emperor where he creates this absolutely massive sphere of fire that kind of looks like a literal meteorite. And on the other hand, he can also use his powers for stuff like powering his tiny cutesy boat across the ocean. What makes Ace really unique is that his flames aren't just something he controls, they are literally him. And that's exactly why his abilities are so freaking versatile. And the truth is, we don't actually get to see Ace that much throughout the series, but every single time he appears, it is absolutely beautiful. Anime usually uses fire to create some of the best looking scenes you'll ever see. The flickering lights and the explosive bursts that immediately tell your brain that big things are about to happen. I mean, don't tell me you haven't felt the absolute hype of a character using their fire powers during an intense fight. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's those awesome moments that just convey a ton of emotions. Next up is a man who has literally spent over 1,000 years perfecting his fire powers. Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. Yamamoto is the commander of the Gotei 13, meaning that he's pretty much the big boss in Bleach. When he activates his powers, it creates this massive wave of fire. And I'm not talking some fire here, some fire there. No. All you can see is freaking fire in the entire area. Like, all my screen is fire right now. And this is already kind of insane, but check this out. In Bleach, characters actually have two forms. A basic form, and then the ultimate form called Bankai. This old man has trained for so long that his basic form is stronger than most characters' Bankai. But when he finally activates his own Bankai for the first and only time in the series, things get truly crazy. Instead of a massive explosion of flames, all of Yamamoto's fire gets compressed into this old and rusted sword. This is Zanka no Tachi. Slowly, the air around him becomes so dry that moisture evaporates from the entire city. There isn't a single cloud in the sky, and his power is so overwhelming that if he uses it for a bit too long, it will absolutely destroy everything and everyone around him. So he attacks, and each swing instantly incinerates whatever it touches. The enemy doesn't just get burned, they get erased. And even when he misses, the attacks are so powerful that they create huge craters in the ground. But once his enemy counterattacks, Yamamoto cloaks his entire body in an aura that reaches 15 million degrees, which is the same temperature as the sun, by the way. He looks completely normal, but anything that gets near him turns to ash without him ever touching it. He can literally just walk through most attacks because they get burnt before they ever even, reach him. But that's just the beginning. Yamamoto revives everyone he has ever defeated over the past 1,000 years. And this army of skeletons attacks his opponent relentlessly. And when Yamamoto decides to finally end the battle, he uses his ultimate technique, a single slash that completely erases everything in its path. Yamamoto's Bankai has 4 different attacks, and each one of them is legitimately more terrifying than the last one. But none of them are really about the huge flames that you'd expect from a fire character. And that's the thing, we usually think of fire as just one thing. flames that destroy stuff. But fire powers can literally represent anything you want them to. Fire can be massive and overwhelming, or it can be tiny and delicate. It's not just about burning stuff, even though that's what most people think of first. And when you look at Yamamoto, that's exactly what you see. Sure, he can definitely use these, flashy explosions and destructive fire that's more impressive than most abilities out there. But remember, this is an ancient warrior who spent literal centuries perfecting the mastery of fire. He has powers that perfectly reflect who he is as a person. An old and ancient sword that carries the weight of all this fighting. And in my opinion, that makes it way more terrifying, way more interesting, and also just kind of beautiful. But what happens when someone takes this idea of using fire in a bunch of different ways and decides to make an entire power system out of it? Well, that's where we get Fire Force. Check this out. This guy shoots those intense jets of fire directly from his feet, which sounds kind of silly until you realize that he can fly at insane speeds, use brutal kicks, and time travel by going faster than light. This guy cools down specific areas around him to slow down the expansion of the universe in a certain area. Basically, he literally slows time. And this guy turns fire into a sword. Okay, this one is not that cool, but what if I told you that at some point he cuts the earth in two? This is only 3 characters out of like dozens of them. Even tiny characters can do stuff like change the direction of bullets, turn smoke into ninja tools, stop attacks by converting the heat into sound waves using a bell or even a freaking tuba. I mean, this series literally has different generations of fire users. That's how many there are. What's absolutely insane to me is that the author looked at, just regular fire and somehow made each character's ability completely unique. This isn't just like, this guy shoots fire and this other guy shoots fire just kind of stronger, okay? No. This is an entire system that explores every single possible application of flame manipulation you could ever think of. And probably a bunch you could never think of, and that I could never think of. Each technique is technically fire-based, but they're all completely different versions of what fire can do. And that is insane. Okay, so even though our next character is a fire wielder, he is ironically responsible for some of the coldest victories in all of anime history. This is Roy Mustang. The first thing you need to know is that this man uses these special gloves made from something called Pyrokinesis. Basically, when he snaps his fingers, it creates sparks, kind of like when you hit these rocks together. Then, as soon as he creates a spark, he uses alchemy, which is basically the magic in Fullmetal Alchemist. And that allows him to move the oxygen around him. The sparks and the oxygen together create fire. And finally, he chooses exactly where he wants the fire to go with extreme precision. That basically means he can kind of control if he wants a tiny explosion or a massive explosion. So altogether, make a spark, control oxygen in the air, choose what to burn, bam. And honestly, the snap is just kind of a cool flex because he can actually make, sparks out of anything else like a lighter. But his real power is just how freaking smart he is about using his power. Even though his ability might look super basic, it's actually based in real science, which makes it way different than your typical magic fire explosion. I mean, even though alchemy is kind of like magic, he's definitely not creating fire like a magician or a wizard or whatever. Because apart from the alchemy, everything else is legit. This is so awesome because it means that the limits of his powers make perfect sense. I know this is gonna sound super lame, but his abilities become completely useless in the rain because water obviously prevents the sparks from ever starting. But apart from that, let's be real. There is something so satisfying about watching someone create these massive explosions with nothing more than a freaking snap of their fingers. It is such a simple move, but it just works. My next character is not really a fire wielder, but actually an entire family of fire wielders. Meet the Todorokis. First, we have the dad, Endeavor. This guy's one of the strongest characters in this series, and he's pretty much your classic fire wielder, except that he has a very big problem. My man is absolutely obsessed with becoming the #1 hero, the big boss. So he decides to marry this lady who has ice powers, and that's because their child could potentially be the perfect combination of fire and ice abilities and become this extremely powerful hero. And that's exactly what happens with Shoto, so woohoo! Right? Well, Not really. The thing is, before Shoto, they also had a kid called Toya, and he actually got fire powers that were superior to his father's. Okay, so can you see how his flames are blue? If you look at an actual flame, there are two parts, the orange part and the blue part. And what you need to know is that the blue part is usually the hottest, which is why his blue flames are way hotter than Endeavor's orange flames. And weirdly enough, this is not a good thing. I mean, usually fire wielders can't really be hurt by fire, right? But the crazy, insane problem with Toya is that he was born with his mother's resistance to cold, but not his father's resistance to fire. Which means that every single time he uses his flames, he is literally burning himself. Just to show you what I mean, this is how he looks as a kid. This is how he looks in the middle of the series. And this is how he looks in the end. Yeah, I love this example so much because the Todoroki family is connected by their fire powers. But at the same time, that's also what destroys them. Toya uses his super powerful flames to take revenge on his dad who didn't take care of him. But at the same time, his own fire just burns him. And I think that's why these guys are some of the most complex and emotional examples of fire powers in anime. And finally, our next character is one of the most loved fire wielders in years. But doesn't even use fire at all. Let me explain. This is Kyojiro Rengoku from Demon Slayer, and he can do stuff like this, or even like this. But the coolest one is his ultimate technique that creates this massive fire dragon that completely covers him as he charges forward. This ability looks exactly like a dragon made of fire, right? I mean, I actually remember watching the anime and thinking that those attacks looked sick. But one day, I go on internet and I read this tiny text, this random text that the author wrote where they explained that all those incredible elemental effects, yeah, they aren't actually there. Basically, all this fire stuff is just there to look pretty. There isn't actually any fire there. Rengoku uses flame breathing, which is a sword technique that looks like fire. But then, can you actually call him a fire wielder? I mean, we usually think of fire as something that burns and destroys everything it touches, but fire can also be warm, comforting, and even inspiring. The kind of fire that represents passion and determination, like the burning fire inside of someone who refuses to ever give up. Even though all of this is just human skill, Rengoku captures the essence of fire better than most characters who actually control fire. This man represents protection just as much as he represents hope. His presence literally lights the way for other protagonists, guiding them when they need it most. He lives by the saying, set your heart ablaze, constantly encouraging others to show passion and courage in everything they do. His fire isn't just a fighting technique. In his final battle, even as he's pushing his body way beyond its limits, his passion never wavers for a single second. He fights his enemy with everything he's got until his final moments that he spends with this beautiful smile. There's no devil fruit giving him powers or a special bloodline that makes him naturally strong, and no magical abilities. Just incredible training, discipline, an unbreakable spirit. Rengoku proves that you don't need supernatural powers to embody the qualities of fire, and I think that's exactly what makes him special. There's a good reason why so many of these fire-wielding characters are so inspiring to us. Beyond how cool it is, fire connects to something deep within us, our inner fire. That's why fire powers dominate anime and manga, and it's also why I think Rengoku is the best depiction of a fire wielder.